Alex had always dreamed of moving to a quiet neighborhood where mornings were filled with birdsong and evenings were calm and peaceful. After months of searching, he finally found the perfect house at the end of a cul-de-sac. It had a small garden, a cozy porch, and a driveway that led right up to the garage. For Alex, it felt like the perfect retreat from the busyness of city life. The first few weeks went smoothly. He spent weekends arranging furniture, tending to the garden, and getting to know his new neighbors. Most of them were polite and friendly, waving when they passed by or stopping for a quick chat. Life was calm, almost idyllic. But soon, Alex noticed a subtle shift. One morning, as he prepared to leave for work, he found a car blocking the middle of his driveway. He had parked there the night before, so it wasn't a temporary situation. With a sigh, he knocked on the nearest door, hoping it was just a simple mistake. A neighbor emerged, looked at him with mild annoyance, and shrugged. "I thought it would be fine for a little while," she said before returning inside. Alex tried not to let it bother him. He reminded himself that new neighborhoods came with small challenges. Still, over the next few days, it happened again. Another car, a different neighbor, this time leaving early in the morning without moving it. It was subtle, almost polite in appearance, but the impact was clear. He couldn't leave his house on time. One morning, Alex arrived outside to find his driveway completely blocked. Two cars had parked in a way that made maneuvering impossible. He felt a wave of frustration. He had been patient, polite, and considerate. He didn't want confrontation, but he also needed access to his own property. Determined to address the problem properly, Alex began documenting each incident. He took photos of the cars, noted dates and times, and even filmed short videos showing the blockages. He wasn't preparing for conflict. He just wanted clear records in case the situation escalated. The process itself helped him feel calmer and more organized. Alex also attempted to speak with the Neighborhood Homeowners Association, or HOA, which was responsible for regulating community rules. Their office was small and austere, filled with paperwork and notices about lawn maintenance, parking rules, and other regulations. He explained the situation calmly, showing his evidence. The response was polite but unhelpful. "We understand your concerns," said the HOA representative, a woman named Karen with a confident air, "but as long as the cars aren't parked illegally, there's little we can do." Alex left with a polite smile, but inside he felt a mix of frustration and determination. He realized that if he wanted his driveway to remain clear, he would need a creative solution, one that didn't break any rules but clearly communicated his boundaries. Back home, Alex started observing patterns. He noticed which neighbors tended to park in his driveway at what times and under what circumstances. Some seemed careless, others more deliberate. The knowledge gave him a small sense of control. He could predict when his driveway would be blocked, and perhaps he could plan accordingly. Despite the tension, Alex refused to let the situation overwhelm him. He reminded himself that patience and planning often solved more problems than confrontation. He even began considering harmless ways to ensure his driveway remained accessible, approaches that were clever, noticeable, and safe. As the sun set that evening, Alex stood on his porch, looking at the driveway that had become both a challenge and an opportunity. He felt a mix of anticipation and amusement. This neighborhood had its quirks, but Alex was ready. He wasn't going to let a few blocked cars ruin the calm and peaceful life he had worked so hard to create. Instead, he was about to take the first steps toward reclaiming his driveway, all while keeping his creativity, humor, and patience intact. The quiet of the street was reassuring, but Alex knew that the days ahead would test his cleverness and resolve. One thing was certain: his driveway would no longer be a problem, and he was determined to ensure that in the most inventive and safe way possible. The next morning, Alex woke to the familiar sight of two cars blocking his driveway once again. It was early, the sun barely cresting over the rooftops, and the quiet neighborhood was just beginning to stir. He had hoped the previous documentation and polite requests would have deterred this, but the reality was clear. The problem had not only persisted, it seemed to be growing. Alex took a deep breath and reminded himself that losing patience would only make things harder. He grabbed his camera and started recording, capturing each vehicle with time-stamped images and short video clips. Over the next few days, a pattern began to emerge. Certain neighbors parked with apparent disregard, while others seemed influenced by a subtle encouragement from the HOA itself. Karen, the HOA's most visible representative, had become a frequent presence in the neighborhood. She wore a confident, almost imperious demeanor, and she had a reputation for strictly enforcing community rules, or at least the ones she chose to enforce. When Alex reached out to her office again, politely requesting action, Karen's response was firm but dismissive. "Your driveway is on private property," she said with a slight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Technically, the vehicles aren't breaking any rules. You'll need to address this directly with your neighbors." Alex left the office feeling a mix of frustration and determination. It was clear that relying on the HOA alone would not solve the problem. He began considering alternative strategies, not aggressive or harmful ones, but clever, noticeable, and safe ways to ensure his driveway remained accessible. He also started paying closer attention to the flow of traffic in the neighborhood. He noticed when certain residents tended to leave for work, how delivery trucks maneuvered through the streets, and the timing of social visits from other neighbors. This observation allowed him to anticipate potential driveway blockages before they occurred. One neighbor, a retired engineer with a quirky sense of humor, noticed Alex's growing frustration. He approached Alex one afternoon, leaning over the low garden fence with a grin. "You look like someone plotting a grand experiment," he said, chuckling. "What's going on?" Alex explained the situation briefly, careful to emphasize that he wanted a safe and non-confrontational solution. Mr.'s eyes lit up with interest. "Well, there are ways to make your point without causing any harm," he said. "Sometimes the simplest ideas are the most effective. You just need to be clever, visible, and a little unpredictable." Encouraged by Mr.'s input, Alex began sketching ideas. He wanted solutions that would startle anyone blocking the driveway but would be completely safe. Small devices, clever arrangements, and visual cues came to mind. Each idea was carefully weighed. It had to be noticeable, unintrusive, and legal. As the days passed, the driveway blockages continued. Alex's patience was tested, but he refused to react impulsively. Instead, he focused on preparing a creative plan. In quiet moments, he imagined different scenarios: neighbors arriving, being surprised by a harmless alert, and realizing they could not simply park there without consequence. At the same time, he kept building his case for the HOA. Each incident was documented meticulously, with photos, videos, and detailed notes. He imagined a scenario where he could show the evidence if needed, demonstrating that he had handled the matter calmly, responsibly, and without confrontation. The tension in the neighborhood also grew. Some neighbors noticed Alex's preparation and whispered about it. The rumors added a subtle pressure on the HOA, though Karen herself remained unaware of what Alex was planning. The humor and anticipation built as Alex quietly finalized his setup, knowing the moment of truth would eventually arrive. By the end of the week, Alex felt ready. He had a detailed plan that combined harmless devices, strategic observation, and a little bit of showmanship. He could not predict every reaction, but he was confident that his approach would make a clear statement while remaining completely safe. As he stood on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Alex felt a mix of anticipation and amusement. The problem that had started as a small inconvenience had evolved into a challenge he was ready to meet. Calm, clever, and creative, that was how he intended to reclaim his driveway. And somewhere in the quiet streets of the neighborhood, the first signs of change were about to begin. By midweek, word of the driveway situation had begun to ripple quietly through the neighborhood. Alex's neighbors noticed his careful observation and the small changes he had made around his property. A subtle sense of curiosity grew. Some residents whispered in passing, while others simply watched from their porches. The street, usually calm and predictable, was beginning to hum with quiet anticipation. Some neighbors approached Alex, asking innocently if everything was all right. He responded with a polite smile, careful not to reveal too much. "Yes, just making sure everything stays organized," he said, shrugging as if nothing unusual was happening. The curious glances and friendly comments only fueled his determination to proceed with his plan thoughtfully. A few neighbors, naturally cautious, remained distant. They had heard stories of HOA disputes that escalated unnecessarily and were hesitant to get involved. Alex understood their hesitation and respected it. He didn't want conflict. He wanted a solution that was clever, noticeable, and most importantly, harmless. His retired engineer neighbor, became a quiet partner in Alex's planning. He visited regularly, offering insights and suggestions. "You don't need to confront anyone directly," he said one afternoon, leaning on his cane with a grin. "Sometimes the most effective message is the one that arrives without words." With his advice in mind, Alex began testing small setups in the driveway, harmless devices that reacted to movement. A sprinkler here, a small wind chime there, a visual alert in another spot. Each experiment was carefully observed, making sure nothing could cause harm and that it could only serve as a gentle, surprising reminder for anyone attempting to park inappropriately. Meanwhile, Karen and a few other HOA members continued their routine visits, unaware that Alex had started quietly preparing. They parked with confidence, certain that Alex had no real way to assert himself. Their presence, combined with the subtle changes Alex had made around the driveway, created an almost cinematic tension. It was as if the neighborhood itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable moment of realization. Other neighbors began to take notice of the patterns in Alex's behavior. Some found it amusing. Children playing on the sidewalk giggled at the subtle twinkle of wind chimes, while adults exchanged quiet smiles when Alex calmly documented incidents. Rumors of mysterious driveway surprises began to circulate, adding humor and intrigue to the otherwise ordinary suburban street. Alex, for his part, remained focused and calm. He understood that the situation required patience and creativity, not confrontation. Each day, he adjusted his setup slightly, testing new positions for his devices, ensuring everything was safe and unobtrusive. The anticipation of the HOA arriving unaware of the preparations added a subtle thrill to his otherwise peaceful days. By the end of the week, Alex had completed his preparations. Everything was in place, carefully balanced between visibility and safety. He had ensured that anyone attempting to block his driveway would receive a noticeable reminder without being harmed or startled excessively. The moment of truth was approaching, and Alex felt a quiet mix of excitement and calm confidence. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the streetlights flickered on, Alex stood on his porch, surveying his driveway. The gentle hum of the neighborhood, the soft rustling of leaves, and the faint laughter of children at play all combined to create a serene backdrop for what was about to unfold. He knew the next few days could be critical in reclaiming his space, but he felt ready. Humor and creativity had become his allies. By planning carefully, documenting every step, and engaging a few trusted neighbors, Alex had transformed a frustrating situation into an opportunity for clever problem-solving. The neighborhood, whether knowingly or not, was now invested in the unfolding story. Every car, every footstep on the sidewalk, every subtle glance from a window contributed to the sense that something unusual and harmlessly entertaining was about to happen. For Alex, the driveway was more than just a patch of pavement. It had become a canvas for ingenuity, a stage for subtle humor, and a test of patience. As he turned to head inside that evening, he allowed himself a small smile. The challenge was far from over, but the first steps toward resolution had already begun, and the neighborhood would soon learn that clever thinking often outshines confrontation. The calm before the moment of action was almost tangible. Everyone in the street, knowingly or unknowingly, was waiting. And Alex, poised and prepared, was ready to show that patience, creativity, and a little humor could turn even the most frustrating situation into a story worth remembering. Alex had spent days observing, documenting, and quietly preparing. Now, everything was ready for the next stage. The driveway, which had been a source of frustration, was about to become a subtle stage for a harmless, clever demonstration of boundaries. He double-checked his setup. Along the edges of the driveway, motion-activated sprinklers were carefully placed. They were harmless but sure to startle anyone who stepped into the wrong space at the wrong time. Near the garage, small wind chimes dangled from hooks, positioned to ring softly yet noticeably if a car approached too close. Even a few reflective markers, arranged strategically, added a visual cue that made blocking the driveway more noticeable. Alex stepped back and surveyed his preparations. Everything was safe, entirely legal, and designed to send a clear message without creating conflict or injury. The goal was simple. Anyone attempting to block the driveway would be reminded in a surprising but harmless way that Alex's space deserved respect. He ran a few tests on his own, walking through the driveway to ensure the motion triggers worked correctly. A sprinkler sprayed a fine arc of water, a chime jingled lightly, and the reflective markers caught the fading sunlight. Satisfied, Alex stepped back with a grin. The setup was playful, creative, and effective, perfect for the situation at hand. Alex knew timing would be key. He had studied the routines of the neighbors who tended to park in his driveway, nodding when they were most likely to arrive. By coordinating his setup and observing the patterns, he could ensure that the surprises would happen exactly when needed, maximizing awareness without causing alarm. At the same time, he kept documenting everything, photographing the placement of devices, and even noting the order in which each would be triggered. This record was not only practical but also part of the broader strategy, a calm, methodical approach that left no room for misunderstandings or false accusations. Word of his quiet preparations had begun to ripple subtly through the neighborhood. Some neighbors, particularly those who had watched from their porches, whispered about Alex's careful movements and the slight changes to his driveway. "He's definitely up to something," one neighbor said with a smile. "I'm curious to see what it is." Alex welcomed the curiosity. The subtle attention created a sense of anticipation without confrontation. By keeping everything harmless and clever, he could assert his boundaries while also maintaining goodwill in the community. Humor, after all, could be an ally in even the most frustrating situations. Karen and the other HOA members continued their routines, oblivious to the subtle changes. They parked with confidence, thinking Alex was still the same polite, patient neighbor who had raised his concerns without much follow-through. Little did they know, Alex had transformed his driveway into a gentle but unmistakable reminder that his property deserved respect. As the week went on, Alex adjusted the setup for maximum effect. He moved sprinklers slightly, repositioned chimes, and added small visual cues that would catch attention. Each adjustment was subtle, yet together, they created a coordinated system that was ready to respond automatically to any intrusion. The driveway was no longer a passive space. It had become an interactive, harmless boundary that conveyed a clear message. One evening, Alex stood on the porch, looking at the driveway in the golden light of the setting sun. He felt a sense of calm confidence mixed with anticipation. The preparation was complete, and the next time someone attempted to block his driveway, his clever plan would be revealed in all its harmless ingenuity. The stage was set, the timing had been calculated, and the neighborhood's curiosity added an invisible layer of excitement. Alex felt a quiet satisfaction. He had transformed a source of frustration into an opportunity for creativity and problem-solving. The driveway was more than just pavement now. It was a carefully managed space, a test of observation, planning, and subtle humor. He knew the moment of truth was approaching. Soon, the driveway would be tested, and the harmless surprises he had arranged would convey a clear and memorable message. Alex smiled to himself, confident that patience, creativity, and careful planning could solve even the most persistent neighborhood challenges. As he turned to head inside, he allowed himself a small chuckle. The calm, clever approach he had chosen would not only protect his driveway, but also bring a touch of humor and amusement to the situation. The next step was inevitable, and Alex was ready. It was a crisp Thursday morning when Alex first noticed the familiar pattern, 2 cars approaching his driveway. He had anticipated this moment for days, maybe even weeks, and a quiet excitement ran through him. Today, the driveway would finally be tested, not with confrontation or anger, but with a clever, harmless surprise that would communicate his boundaries clearly. As the first car slowly rolled forward, Alex watched from his porch, camera in hand. The motion-activated sprinklers were ready, the wind chimes poised to ring, and the reflective markers perfectly aligned to catch the morning sunlight. Everything was in position. The driveway was quiet, the street calm, and for a moment, it seemed as if even the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. The first car edged closer, the driver apparently confident that blocking the driveway would be as easy as always. A small movement near the edge of the driveway triggered the first sprinkler. A gentle arc of water sprayed outward, catching the car's front tire. The driver paused, looking around in mild confusion. A soft tinkle followed immediately from the wind chimes, as if a small orchestra were announcing the event. The driver smiled awkwardly, glancing toward Alex's porch, and began backing up carefully. The second car, slightly bolder, attempted to maneuver further in. Another motion sensor triggered a small visual alert, a subtle flash from a reflective marker that caught the driver's attention. Startled, the car rolled back slightly, and the driver laughed nervously. It was clear that the combination of sprinklers, chimes, and visual cues had done its job, delivering a noticeable, harmless message that this driveway was not to be blocked. Alex stayed calm, photographing the scene discreetly while keeping his smile polite. He didn't shout, he did confront, and he certainly didn't cause harm. The situation, though amusing, was entirely controlled, creative, and safe. His careful planning had paid off. The neighbors, who had been watching from across the street and from their porches, couldn't help but smile. Children pointed at the sprinklers in fascination, giggling as the water arced gracefully through the morning light. Some adults exchanged knowing glances, impressed by the harmless ingenuity. Rumors of Alex's driveway surprises had spread quietly, and now everyone could see the clever execution firsthand. Karen, the HOA representative, arrived shortly after, seemingly unaware of what had just occurred. She parked near the sidewalk, her usual confident expression still intact. As she stepped toward the driveway, a gentle tinkle from the wind chimes caught her attention, followed by a small spray from a motion-triggered sprinkler. Her eyes widened slightly, and then, to Alex's quiet amusement, she began to laugh. Instead of confrontation, there was humor. Karen realized that the driveway had been transformed into a harmless but clever system that sent a clear message. She shook her head, smiling, and said aloud, "Well, that's creative." The tension that had lingered in the neighborhood for weeks was replaced with light-hearted relief. The drivers of the blocked cars, realizing the harmless but unmistakable reminder, moved their vehicles without complaint. Alex waved politely, offering reassurance that everything was fine. The entire situation, from start to finish, had been resolved without anger, conflict, or harm. It was a demonstration of clever planning, patience, and good humor, a subtle victory for reason and creativity. After the incident, Alex spent a few moments walking through the driveway to ensure everything was in order. The sprinklers and chimes had performed perfectly, and no damage had occurred. He made a few minor adjustments, anticipating that future visits might require slight tweaks, but overall, the setup had worked exactly as intended. By mid-morning, the neighborhood had settled into a calm, amused buzz. Neighbors waved as they passed, some teasing lightly about the driveway spectacle. Even Karen, now smiling, nodded in acknowledgement. The humor and harmless ingenuity of Alex's approach had turned a source of frustration into a story the community could enjoy, one that reminded everyone that boundaries could be asserted creatively and safely. As Alex stood on his porch later that morning, sipping a cup of coffee, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The driveway was once again fully under his control, his clever plan had succeeded, and the neighborhood had witnessed a solution that combined creativity, humor, and patience. The situation had been resolved without conflict, without harm, and without anger, only with clever thinking and careful planning. For Alex, the driveway was no longer just a passage to his garage. It had become a symbol of ingenuity, patience, and the power of a calm, clever approach. The next time a car approached, he would be ready, but for now, he simply enjoyed the satisfaction of a job well done. A few days after the driveway incident, Alex was quietly enjoying a Saturday morning when a new development occurred. The HOA had decided to call the local sheriff, hoping to address what they perceived as an unusual situation. Alex had anticipated this possibility and felt a mixture of amusement and calm preparedness. He had documented everything meticulously, ensuring that when the sheriff arrived, the story would be clear, harmless, and well-organized. When the sheriff's patrol car rolled slowly down the street, Alex stepped onto his porch, waving politely. The sheriff, a tall, easygoing figure with a quick smile, got out and approached Alex. His uniform carried authority, but his demeanor was relaxed, almost curious. "I hear there's been some activity on this driveway," he said, raising an eyebrow with a hint of amusement. Alex explained the situation clearly and calmly. He showed the sheriff the driveway setup, pointing out the harmless motion-activated sprinklers, the wind chimes, and the reflective markers. "It's all completely safe," Alex said. "I just wanted to ensure that my driveway wasn't blocked and that there was a gentle reminder for anyone who tries." The sheriff listened attentively, occasionally glancing at the devices with a smile. He walked along the driveway, triggering a sprinkler and causing the soft chimes to ring. He paused, chuckled, and shook his head. "Well, that's clever," he said. "I've seen a lot of driveway disputes in my time, but this is imaginative." Alex could not help but smile. The tension he had felt for weeks melted into a sense of calm validation. Here was a figure of authority recognizing the harmless creativity and careful planning behind the setup. No one had been hurt, no laws had been broken, and yet the message was unmistakably clear. Karen and a few other HOA members arrived shortly afterward, expecting to escalate the situation. They were surprised to see the sheriff calmly inspecting the setup, smiling, and even triggering a small reaction from one of the sprinklers. The wind chimes jingled lightly as the sunlight reflected off the driveway markers, creating a scene that was more amusing than confrontational. The sheriff addressed the HOA members directly. "Everything here is safe and legal," he said, his tone firm but friendly. "This is a homeowner's property, and they've taken care to handle a recurring issue responsibly. There's no violation, no harm, and no reason for enforcement action. It's creative problem-solving, and I can respect that." Karen's expression shifted from confidence to mild surprise, then to reluctant amusement. She glanced at Alex, acknowledging, perhaps grudgingly, that his approach had worked. The humor of the situation was not lost on her, and even she had to smile at the harmless ingenuity on display. The sheriff stayed a few more minutes, speaking briefly with both Alex and a few neighbors who had gathered to observe. He emphasized the importance of resolving conflicts safely, creatively, and without escalation. His presence reassured Alex that the driveway was now secure, both practically and legally. After the sheriff left, the neighborhood buzzed with quiet amusement. Word spread quickly that the local law enforcement had found the situation harmless and even entertaining. Neighbors smiled knowingly when they passed Alex's driveway, some joking about how clever the setup was. The humor and harmless ingenuity of the approach had transformed a potentially stressful dispute into a light-hearted story for the entire street. Alex reflected on the experience, appreciating how patience, careful planning, and creativity had turned a source of frustration into a positive outcome. He had documented every step, anticipated reactions, and most importantly, ensured that no one was harmed or upset beyond a gentle surprise. By the end of the day, the neighborhood had returned to its usual calm rhythm. Children played on the sidewalks, neighbors chatted across fences, and the driveway stood as a quiet, clever testament to Alex's ingenuity. The sheriff's visit had validated the approach, reinforcing that problem-solving could be imaginative, safe, and effective. Alex stood on his porch, sipping a cup of coffee as the sun dipped low in the sky. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The driveway was once again fully under his control, his clever plan had succeeded, and the neighborhood had witnessed a resolution that balanced humor, safety, and effectiveness. In that moment, Alex realized that a calm, thoughtful, and creative approach could solve even the most persistent problems. The situation had not only been resolved, but had also brought the community closer together in a subtle, amusing way. And for Alex, that driveway, once a source of frustration, had become a symbol of clever problem-solving and patient ingenuity. After the sheriff's visit, the neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The driveway, which had once been a source of constant frustration for Alex, was now respected by everyone who had previously ignored boundaries. The motion-activated sprinklers, wind chimes, and reflective markers had sent a clear, harmless message that Alex's property deserved consideration, and the results were evident. Alex walked down the driveway that morning, checking each device one last time. The sprinklers functioned perfectly, the wind chimes jingled softly with the slightest breeze, and the reflective markers gleamed in the sunlight. Everything was exactly as he had arranged it. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the problem had been resolved without confrontation, harm, or hostility. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. Some waved in greeting as they passed, smiling knowingly at Alex. Others approached cautiously, curious about how the situation had unfolded. Children still giggled when they saw the sprinklers spray lightly or heard the gentle tinkle of the wind chimes, adding a playful touch to the neighborhood's morning routines. Even Karen, the HOA representative who had once dismissed Alex's concerns, seemed to adjust her attitude. She parked farther down the street, nodded politely, and avoided blocking the driveway again. While she maintained her professional demeanor, there was a subtle acknowledgement that Alex's creative, safe approach had earned respect. Alex felt a quiet pride in how he had handled the situation. He had faced repeated frustration, carefully planned a solution, and executed it without anger or confrontation. The outcome had been effective, humorous, and completely harmless, a clear testament to the power of patience, creativity, and thoughtful problem-solving. Word of the harmless driveway surprises spread quietly through the neighborhood. Residents shared amused stories about the gentle sprinklers and jingling chimes, always emphasizing that nothing had been damaged and no one had been hurt. Alex's clever approach became something of a legend in the neighborhood, an example of how challenges could be addressed with ingenuity rather than conflict. Neighbors who had previously been wary or hesitant now approached Alex with friendliness and curiosity. They asked for advice on minor disputes, small boundary issues, and ways to maintain harmony in the community. Alex gladly shared his approach, emphasizing creativity, safety, and patience as the key principles. The incident had not only resolved his driveway problem, but had also strengthened connections among the community. For Alex, the experience offered more than just a solution to blocked driveways. It was a reminder that thoughtful planning and a sense of humor could transform stressful situations into opportunities for creativity and engagement. He had maintained his composure, documented the situation, and implemented a harmless, clever system that conveyed a clear message without anger or harm. As the week progressed, life in the neighborhood returned to a sense of calm normalcy. Cars no longer blocked Alex's driveway, the HOA's presence was less tense, and the community seemed more aware of boundaries and consideration. Alex could now enjoy the quiet mornings he had originally sought when moving into the neighborhood. One afternoon, as he sat on his porch with a cup of tea, Alex reflected on the journey. The driveway, which had once symbolized frustration and helplessness, had become a symbol of clever problem-solving, patience, and safe creativity. He smiled at the thought that even simple devices, a sprinkler, a chime, a reflective marker, could communicate so effectively without conflict. Humor had played a key role as well. The harmless surprises brought amusement to neighbors and even to the previously stern HOA representative. The situation had turned from a potential source of tension into a light-hearted story that the community could share. The laughter and smiles had reinforced the idea that creativity and patience often work better than confrontation. By the end of the week, Alex felt a sense of closure. The driveway was fully under his control, his creative plan had succeeded, and the neighborhood had witnessed a resolution that combined humor, safety, and clever thinking. The HOA had adjusted its behavior, neighbors were more respectful, and Alex could finally enjoy the calm and peaceful environment he had sought when he moved in. Standing on the porch that evening, Alex looked down the driveway one last time. The sun cast a warm glow across the street, the wind rustled the chimes gently, and the sprinklers glistened in the soft light. Everything was exactly as it should be. He smiled to himself, satisfied that patience, creativity, and a sense of humor had not only solved a problem, but had also brought a positive change to the neighborhood. Alex had reclaimed his driveway, preserved harmony, and shown that clever thinking and thoughtful planning could triumph in even the most frustrating situations. The story of his driveway would remain in the neighborhood's memory for months to come, a testament to ingenuity, patience, and harmless humor. The days following the driveway incident were noticeably calmer. Alex's neighborhood, once a quiet place with the occasional ripple of frustration, had settled into a new rhythm, one marked by respect, subtle humor, and a touch of curiosity. The harmless surprises he had installed, motion-activated sprinklers, jingling wind chimes, and reflective markers, had achieved exactly what he had intended, a clever reminder that his property deserved consideration. Alex spent more time on his porch that week, sipping coffee and observing the quiet street. Children ran along the sidewalks, laughing as the sprinklers sprayed lightly over the garden edges, and neighbors exchanged friendly nods or whispered jokes about the mysterious driveway surprises. The humor of the situation had lingered, but it was never mean-spirited. Instead, it brought the community together in a gentle, shared amusement. Karen, the HOA representative, had noticeably changed her approach. She no longer parked carelessly near Alex's driveway and greeted him politely whenever she passed by. While she remained professional and attentive to her duties, her attitude reflected a newfound respect for Alex's patience and ingenuity. The gentle humor of his harmless devices had communicated more than words ever could. Alex reflected on the journey that had brought him here. What had started as a series of frustrating mornings, blocked by cars, had transformed into a lesson in patience, observation, and creativity. He realized that his careful planning, coupled with a touch of playful ingenuity, had not only resolved the issue, but had also strengthened his relationships with neighbors. The situation, once tense and stressful, had become a story of harmless cleverness that everyone could enjoy. One afternoon, his retired engineer neighbor stopped by for a visit. "I must say, Alex," he said with a grin, "I didn't think you'd turn a blocked driveway into a neighborhood spectacle. You've handled it with patience, cleverness, and humor. Most people would have lost their cool long ago." Alex chuckled and shrugged. "I wanted a solution that didn't create new problems," he said. "Sometimes you have to be creative, especially when rules and personalities make things complicated, and a little humor never hurts." As word spread through the neighborhood, more residents came to respect Alex's approach. Some asked for advice on minor disputes in their own yards, curious about how to assert boundaries without creating conflict. Alex shared his approach generously, emphasizing planning, harmless creativity, and a sense of patience. He encouraged neighbors to address issues thoughtfully rather than reacting in anger. The driveway itself had become a symbol of calm ingenuity. Children continued to laugh as they noticed the sprinklers spray lightly or heard the wind chimes tinkle, and adults appreciated the clever solution. Alex had taken what could have been a constant source of tension and turned it into a learning experience, one that combined practicality, humor, and harmless problem-solving. Even the HOA seemed to adjust slightly in its approach. While they continued to enforce community rules, there was now a subtle recognition that Alex had addressed his problem responsibly and creatively. Attempts to challenge or test the boundaries of his driveway were no longer attempted, as the message had been communicated effectively without confrontation. One evening, as the sun set and the street was bathed in a golden glow, Alex stood on his porch and looked down the driveway. The sprinklers glistened, the chimes swayed gently in the breeze, and the reflective markers caught the fading light. It was a serene scene, a quiet testament to thoughtful planning and clever ingenuity. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The driveway was free, his boundaries had been respected, and the community had witnessed a solution that combined humor, safety, and creativity. More than that, Alex had proven to himself that patience, observation, and clever thinking could transform a frustrating situation into an opportunity for positive, even playful resolution. As he turned to go inside, Alex allowed himself one last smile. The problem that had once seemed overwhelming had been handled with calm determination and harmless ingenuity. The neighborhood was at peace, and the story of the driveway surprises would remain a light-hearted lesson in patience, creativity, and clever problem-solving. In the end, Alex realized that the experience was about more than just reclaiming his driveway. It was about demonstrating that even in a community filled with rules, personalities, and challenges, thoughtful solutions and a touch of humor could bring people together, resolve conflicts, and create lasting respect. His driveway, once a source of frustration, had become a symbol of cleverness, patience, and harmless ingenuity, a story that the neighborhood would remember fondly for years to come. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next mystery on HOA Hunter Stories.